Patience. Greer did not leave Marin Hollow after the investigation closed. This is the part of the story that most people find stranger than the ledger, stranger than the bones, stranger than the photographs. She was a real estate developer from a city 400 miles away. She had a business, a partner, 2 adult children, an apartment with a terrace garden she tended with care. She had every reason to leave. Instead, 3 weeks after the forensic team packed up, she signed a 12-month lease on a house on the eastern edge of town. She told Todd she had personal reasons. She did not elaborate. Todd, who had known Patience for 11 years and considered her the most pragmatically rational person he had ever met, did not press. He noted privately that her voice on the phone sounded different, quieter, like someone speaking from the bottom of something deep. What Patience had not told the investigators, what she had told no one, was about the 41st minute in the basement. She had told them about the ledger, the table, the remains. She had described all of it truthfully. She had not told them about the voice. It had not been loud. It had not been threatening. It had come from no specific direction, not from the walls or the ceiling or the dark corner behind the stairs, but from somewhere closer than the room. Perhaps inside her own skull, she thought, which is the kind of thought you have when something happens that you cannot file into any existing category of experience. 3 words, low, more vibration than sound, more felt than heard. You were invited. And here's the thing about those 3 words. They had not frightened her. They had felt like information, calm, factual, accurate information, delivered with the certainty of something stating an observable truth. The way you might say the sky is blue or the water is cold. Not a threat, not a warning. A simple clarification of facts. She had been expected. Her arrival at this basement, in this field, in this town, was not the accident of a footnote in a digitized archive she'd found during a bout of insomnia at 2 in the morning, but the conclusion of a process that had begun long before she was born. She dreamed of the table every night, but unlike the investigators' shared dream, hers was different. She was not seated as a guest. She was at the head of the table, and the long-armed figure across from her was not facing her. It was facing the door, as if waiting for someone else to arrive, as if she and the figure were, together, the hosts. She started going to Aldrich's in her 3rd week in town. Breakfast, then lunch, then dinner. Warren always seated her in a different booth, greeted her by name, recommended whatever was freshest. The food was extraordinary, not technically superior, though it was that. It was that it satisfied something she hadn't known she was hungry for, something older than appetite, something in the same register as the voice in the basement, low, below language, below thought. In her 6th week, she asked Warren about the empty booth in the back. He looked at her for a long moment, a measuring look, the look of someone deciding whether you are ready for a room they haven't yet shown you. Then he said, "Would you like to sit there?" She said yes. The booth felt different. She could not say how. The vinyl was the same, the table identical. The window beside it looked out on the same gray parking lot. But seated there, she felt observed, not watched, observed. The way a specimen is observed. The way something under glass is observed by something patient and very still and very old. She ate her dinner. It was the best meal she had ever had. When she reached the bottom of her coffee cup, Warren was there, unhurried, as if he had been waiting for precisely this moment. "You went into the basement," he said. "Yes." "It spoke to you." She didn't ask how he knew. "Yes." He slid into the seat across from her and folded his hands on the table, and he told her, not everything she would learn over the months that followed, that everything could not be delivered in one conversation. It came in layers, like sediment, like geology, like the rings of something very old, cut open, but enough to understand the shape of it. The Aldriches had not started the practice. They had inherited it not from a parent or grandparent, but from the land itself, from whatever lived in the root system beneath the field, whatever the scarecrow's feet were anchored to. The bones in the scarecrow's frame were the bones of the first ones to find it, long before the Aldriches, long before the farmhouse, perhaps long before the town. They had come to the field drawn, as patience had been drawn, by something operating below conscious intention, and they had encountered what lived there, and they had been changed by it. The change was dietary, among other things, not because the thing in the field demanded it, because it offered something in exchange, and what it offered was so precisely calibrated to the hunger that most humans carry without knowing they carry it, that the transaction had always been, in Warren's word, consensual. Patience asked the question she had been not asking for 6 weeks. "What is in the food?" Warren smiled, warm, genuine. The smile of a man who had made thorough and lasting peace with everything he was. "Local," he said. "Always local. Only what arrives willingly." She sat with that. She spent that night in the booth, not sleeping sitting, looking out at the parking lot, which at 3 in the morning was empty except for her car, and at the far edge of the asphalt where the light didn't reach, a tall shape standing very still with its arms at its sides. She looked at it for a long time. It did not move. Then she looked away, because she understood in the way you understand things that live below language that it was not performing, not threatening, just there. As it had always been, as it would be long after she was gone. However, she was eventually gone, and this was not a horror. This was just the oldest fact about the world, with everything humans had layered over it stripped away. Something feeds. Something is always fed upon. The only question that had ever mattered, the only question the Ledger's 112 years had been exploring was whether you were at the table or on it. And the answer, Warren told her, was simpler than people wanted it to be. Not strength, not intelligence, not morality. Whether you heard the invitation. The investigators had not heard it. Cole Mathers had not heard it. The demolition crew, the structural engineer, the county officials, none of them. And so none of them had been asked. The field simply watched them work and do their thorough, well-meaning, entirely impotent jobs, and returned to its stillness when they left, patient in the absolute way that something older than memory can be patient. But patience had heard it. She did not leave at the end of her 12-month lease. She bought a house. She planted a garden in the spring. She became a regular at Aldrich's and then gradually a fixture, one of those people who seem to have always been in a town, who fit into a place with the frictionless ease of someone who belongs to it. She began to help Warren in the kitchen. She was a good cook, always had been, but what she learned there was not technique. It was philosophy, the understanding that a meal is a relationship, that preparation is attention, that what you choose to consume, and how and in whose presence, is among the most honest things a person ever does, more honest than what they say, more honest than what they believe about themselves. At the table, everything is true. At the table, the animal underneath the person surfaces, and the only question is whether you shame it or honor it. The Harvest Man. Warren's name for it, not the Ledger's, had been here before agriculture, before language, before the primate who eventually named itself human had developed the cognitive equipment to feel ashamed of what it ate and how much it wanted to eat and how good the eating felt. It had watched the whole development. The shame had perhaps amused it, in whatever way something that old and that patient could be amused. All those centuries of ceremonies and taboos and moral architectures built specifically to suppress the oldest memory that the species had always been hungry, profoundly, structurally, irrevocably hungry, for flesh and warmth and closeness and the specific comfort of being at a table in the dark with something that knows exactly what you are and feeds you anyway. On the 1-year anniversary of the day she found the basement, Patience walked to the field at dusk. The corn was exactly as it had always been, neither growing nor dying, brown, dry, rustling faintly in a wind that wasn't blowing. The scarecrow stood at the center. She walked toward it. The distance shortened faster than her steps could account for, and then she was in front of it, closer than she'd ever been, close enough to count the teeth. 42. She looked up at its face, at the hollows where eyes would be, at the grinning, fixed mouth, at the leathery material stretched across the planes of a very old skull, and she felt, very clearly, seen, not watched, known, with the same calm specificity as the voice in the basement, the same certainty, not the recognition of a predator identifying prey, but the recognition of something older and stranger than that, the recognition of someone who has been waiting for a specific person for a very long time and is relieved finally to see them arrive. Its arms at its sides were very long, and slowly she would tell Warren this later, and he would nod as if confirming something he had long expected slowly, 1 degree at a time, with the deliberateness of something that has been still for centuries and is now choosing, for the first time in a very long while, to move. They began to rise, wide, both arms extending wide, not grasping, not threatening. The way you open your arms to someone coming home after a long absence, the way you stand when you want to make absolutely clear that you see them, that you've been waiting, that there is a seat at the table, and it has always had their name on it. Patience. Greer stood in the dead corn and looked at the thing that had been there before the corn, and she understood, finally and completely, why she had not left, why none of the ones who heard the invitation had ever left. It wasn't fear. It wasn't compulsion. It was the specific, overwhelming relief of being recognized, of being known the hungry animal underneath all the polite architecture, all the shame, all the centuries of performed humanity, and being told, in a register older than language, "Yes, I see you. Come in. Sit down. You have been expected for a very long time." She went back to the diner. She tied on an apron. Warren was at the stove, and the kitchen smelled extraordinary. And through the pass-through window, she could see the dining room filling with the Thursday evening regulars, familiar faces, people she now knew by name, people who ate here every week with the specific devotion of those who have found the one place that feeds them in the way they actually need to be fed. At the back corner, the reserved booth sat empty and clean, its single-place setting gleaming, waiting. Outside, 3 miles down Route 9, in 12 acres of stubborn brown corn, the harvest man stood with its arms extended wide, patient, as it had always been, as it would always be. Something feeds. The only question is the seat you choose. The reservation stands. The table is always set, and the arms at last are always open.